14. We're going to a very familiar passage you've probably seen before. Now, this particular picture, this is actually a picture that Faye took of the Sea of Galilee on one day that we were there in last week. And now look, Faye does not like boats. I don't know, she doesn't like water. Any of you that know her know this, but she actually took a boat ride in the Sea of Galilee. Can you believe that? So, yeah, and I didn't even have to twist her arm to do it. She did it, and I'm proud of her. But and so this particular story is one of those stories that, of course, the ministry of Jesus, it pretty much was all around the Sea of Galilee. 80% of his ministry took place right around the Sea of Galilee, and specifically more than just a 7-mile stretch, between a few cities. It was a 7-mile stretch on the side of the Sea of Galilee, and this is where 80% of his ministry took place. And so I can't see it anymore. Anyway, and so the Sea of Galilee is 13 miles long, and at the widest place is only 8 miles wide. Now, I don't know what you imagine in your mind what the Sea of Galilee looks like, but in some places, the narrowest point is like 3 miles wide. So it's not like a huge body of water. You can see to the other side, and it's almost hard to imagine sometimes that, some of these storms that arose, that they couldn't make it to the other side. But the way that they tell us is that the way the mountains are shaped and the way the topography is, that when a certain storm comes from a certain direction, it just wreaks havoc on that whole area right there, and it makes the sea to where it's just crazy. And so the disciples found themselves in a situation like this. And let's begin reading in Matthew chapter 14, verse number 22. And I'm just going to point out a few things this morning. That's what we're going to do. And then we'll go home and chew on it a little bit, okay? All right, so Matthew chapter 14, verse number 22. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into his ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore did thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God. Now, this particular passage, this particular story happened there in the Sea of Galilee. But just previous to this, there was something that happened right on the seashore of the Sea of Galilee. You remember the story of the feeding of the 5,000. You remember that story? Where Jesus fed 5,000 men. That's not counting the women and children. He fed 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish. You remember the story. That's happened just previous to that. And he was still dealing with the crowd. All right, he was still dealing with that. And then he sends his disciples out into the boat, out into the deep, across the Sea of Galilee. And he does that, and then he gets done with the crowd, and then he gets by himself, and he begins to pray. And he's praying there. And but this particular story, and can you imagine being there watching and being part of the feeding of the 5,000? Let's think about if you were a disciple. Get into their shoes for a minute. If you were a disciple and you were there and you had been following Jesus, you had left your nets, you had left your tax collecting, you left your job and your business, you had left all of it and was following Jesus, and now he was performing a miracle feeding thousands of people. As a matter of fact, in that passage, in that story, it says, well, look, He's talking about sit them down so we can feed them. And the disciples are looking confused like, look, 200 days' wages, 200 pennyworth is not enough to feed all these people. And they said, sit them down. And of course, there was 5 loaves and 2 fish. He began to break it. Can you imagine being a disciple, carrying a basket of food, and then handing that out and coming back and getting another basket of food, and handing that out and coming back and getting another basket of food, and handing that out? And there was 12 disciples, and they were all doing that. And then they got to the end, and there was 12 baskets of food left over. Can you imagine being a part of that? Can you imagine seeing that? Can you imagine eating there with that? Can you imagine that? And so, look, they're coming off on a high. You with me? They're coming off on a high. Man, we're followers of Jesus. You can't tell me nothing. You know what he can do? You know? And can you see them there? Can you see them? And then, you know, and it's really, when we reach some of our greatest highs and our greatest moments of the Christian life, you better be careful when you get there, because that's when the greatest storms are going to happen in your life. And by the way, let me just say, and the Bible teaches us this, that troubles and storms in life, you're either coming out of one, you're either going into one, or you're in the middle of one. And so that's really how storms work. And the disciples find themselves in this storm. But a couple things I want to point out about this. And, of course, this storm for us, let's make a spiritual application here. This storm for us, there are storms that we have in life. Now, it's raining outside today, but that's not the type of storm. I've been in thunderstorms. Most of you have. I've been in hurricanes. As a matter of fact, the year I moved to Florida, and I asked about hurricanes. Oh, you don't have to worry about those. They haven't hit here in over 100 years. And the year I moved there were 3 that hit. All right, so I've been in hurricanes. I've been in tsunamis. As a matter of fact, and I've been around volcanic eruptions. Can you believe that? I mean, you know, it seems like everywhere I go, there's something happening, you know. I don't know if I bring that on, or the Lord is just trying to teach me extra lessons because I'm so hard-headed. I'm not sure what that is, but we were in Hawaii one time, and the volcano there on the big island began to erupt a little. It wasn't like a huge eruption. It began to erupt a little bit, and that was when they had that earthquake near Japan. And you remember the tsunami that hit Japan, and then they were warning everybody. We were in Hawaii when that happened, and there was a tsunami. It took out the bottom half of our hotel we were staying in, and we had fled and went to higher ground. We wasn't in the hotel, and but anyway, there was a tsunami, volcanic eruptions. We've been in earthquakes. We've been in hurricanes. We've been in all sorts of things, all sorts of places. But this is really not the spiritual application I'm talking about. The spiritual application I'm talking about is storms that we have in life. Now, it can be a physical storm, but the storms that we have in life, and they can come in many forms and many fashions. And when I begin to rattle off some of these, you'll begin to understand what I'm talking about. How many have ever had a storm in their family before? What about with your health? How many's had a storm with that, with your health? What about with your job situation? What about some type of financial thing that you've encountered? And I'm just saying there's all sorts of storms that come along in life that we can identify here. All right, they were experiencing this storm on the sea, and there were some lessons in this, and we're going to go through some of these. But the first major thing that I want to point out here is that, look, is Jesus sent them into this storm. Do you realize that there are storms in life? Sometimes when we enter into a storm or we're having adversity in our life, you know, a lot of times the first thing that we do is we say, man, the devil's all over me. The devil's doing it, this man. I mean, you just don't even know how bad the devil's on me. He's making me deal with this. So sometimes we blame the devil for this, right? The storms that we encounter. And I would say sometimes the storms come along in life because we created ourselves. How many of you ever made a bad financial decision and you end up having to live with it? And man, I mean, it caused havoc in your life. It was trouble. Well, who created that one? You know? And so we can have troubles like that. We can blame the devil, and sometimes we can blame ourselves, and sometimes we get into a storm and we're wondering how in the world we got here. Do you think the disciples were wondering how in the world they got there? Because look, here's the thing. Go back to verse number 22. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into his ship and to go before him to the other side while he sent the multitude away. Who orchestrated this journey? Jesus orchestrated this. Jesus brought this about in their life. You think, why in the world would Jesus do something like that? Well, you know what? He has purpose in everything that he does. And so and I would tell you, not every storm is of Jesus. Sometimes it's our own creation. Sometimes we're battling with the flesh or battling with the devil or something like that. But I want us to understand this morning that sometimes Jesus brings things into our life. Now, some people may tell you, you listen to some of these TV preachers, oh, man, the Lord, he's wonderful. And he is wonderful. You may say, oh, you get saved and you start following the Lord, and man, your bank account's just going to be overflowing, and man, this is going to be a bed of roses, life is just going to be great. That's not the Christian life. As a matter of fact, he says, take up your cross and follow me. That's what he says. And so he even says, look, if the world hated me, it's going to hate you. We're going to have enemies in this world. All these things are going to happen. There's going to be troubles. There's going to be trials. There's going to be temptations. There's going to be storms. There's going to be wrestling and struggling. There's going to be that in life. But what makes it different for the believer is who's with them. All right, that's what makes a difference. And so one of the things is I want us to point out here is that Jesus sent them into this storm. We don't always think about the trials that we go through that Jesus is allowing that because he has purpose behind it. But here, now look, here we go. Jesus sent them, and because Jesus sent them, it says they were living in obedience, were they not? Let me ask you something. Did they get in the right boat? Did they get in it at the right time? Did they get in it and go the right direction? Did they do everything that Jesus had said to do? Have you ever done that? You said, man, why is God allowing this in my life? I'm giving to the church. I'm being faithful to church. I'm doing everything I can do. I'm trying to share Jesus, and God's allowing this in my life. What in the world? You ever been there? You ever had those questions? But here they are, they're living in obedience to the Lord's command, and here they are in the middle of a storm, and here they are. Can you imagine that they don't understand what's going on? Have you ever been in a trial, in a storm of life, and you didn't understand what was going on? I've been there. God, what are you doing here? Why am I here? Why am I dealing with this? And here they are. But I want us to notice something. They were in this storm, and can you imagine what's going through their mind? They had just come off the seashore, feeding of the 5,000. Man, they're pumped up. They're ready to go. Man, Jesus says do this. We're going to obey Jesus. We're going to do that. We're going to do it. And here they are. They're getting there. And now, and I want you to notice something. It says it was evening. Let me say, verse 23. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray, and when the evening was come, he was there alone. So what time of day were the disciples in the boat? All right, now let's go down a little bit further. Verse 25, and in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. So hold on. We've got from the evening. Now let me just say, on a Jewish day, the evening stopped at started, it was 6 o'clock. That was the end of the day, all right, 6 o'clock, and then the new day started. All right, the fourth watch of the night is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. On any given day of the year, any normal day of the year, these men could have made it across the Galilee in 2 hours. In their boat, with their skills and their sails and their ropes and all that, they could have made it across in 2 hours. And here they are in the fourth watch of the night, which is between 3 and 6 o'clock, 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. Now, how long have they been rowing and paddling and trying to get sails and trying to get to the other side? How long now? It's been hours. It's been hours. And so, but I want us to notice something. So as they were struggling, what was Jesus doing? Look, and it says, verse 22, and Jesus straightway constrained the disciples to get into a ship and to go on before him on the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitude away, he went into a mountain apart. What was he doing? To pray. What was he doing? He was praying. Now look, do you think Jesus knew this storm was coming? Absolutely, he knew it. He knew it was there. He knew what they were going to be experiencing. He knew what they were enduring. He knew his eye was on them. He could see them. And what was he doing for them? What was he doing? You know something, when we encounter troubles and struggles in life, And you may think you're all alone. You think you've been abandoned. Let me tell you something. The Bible tells us that Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he ever liveth to make, what? Intercession for us. Do you know what he's doing for you right now? He's praying for you. Now, do you remember the time when he was talking to Peter, Jesus was talking to Peter, and he says this, he says, Satan has desired to sift you as wheat. In other words, Satan wants to chew you up and spit you out. That's what Satan wants. But he didn't say, but I'm going to save you from that. That's not what he said. He says, but I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. That's what he says. That his faith wouldn't fail in the middle of those struggles, in the middle of those trials. So what is Jesus doing here? You know what, we get this picture of who Jesus is, don't we? We get this picture, oh man, he saves me from everything, he protects me from everything, and like we're never supposed to be in danger. I've probably been in times where I have been in more danger than I even realized in certain areas of certain countries and things like that. But here's the thing. I am more protected being in the will of God than I could ever be. Now, let me ask you, I just went to Israel. You know, and there toward the end, they were talking about bombing Iran and all this kind of stuff. You've seen some of that, right? And you know, and it was a little bit of a concern, you know, and there was a little talk about it on that trip. But here's the thing. You know what would happen if a missile hit me and blew me up? What would happen? Would I be better off or worse off? I'd be better off as a believer. You know, and so, look, they were living in obedience. Jesus sent them there. And then at the same time, they were told not to fear. Look what it says in verse 27. Be of good cheer. The storm is still raging. The winds are still blowing. The water's still crashing. Be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. And we're told to be not afraid. Do you realize that a lot of the things that we deal with in this life, and I'm going to give you the fruit of some of these things, it's all the fruit of fear. How many of us deal with stress? How many of us deal with anxiety? How many of us deal with worry? How many of us deal with sometimes depression and things like that? You know where most of that stems from? Most of it. I'm not saying that, and I'm not throwing everything into that baggage. I know people have legitimate medical needs. That's not what I'm saying here. But the vast majority of it, people sitting in here, me, the vast majority of things that we deal with, you know where it stems from? It stems from fear. We began thinking about, well, what if that happens? And what if that happens? And what, I mean, when I was in Israel, you know, I could have been stressed completely out about a bomb going off. You know what? I never once felt threatened. I never once felt fear at all. Faye, did you? No, I mean, I never was once fearful or anything like that. But we get into the mindset sometimes where, man, what if this happens and what if that happens? And we get so bent out of shape, and man, and we become so consumed with everything, our fears and all. You know what that does? That is a lack of trusting the Lord. That's what it is. And he's saying, don't fear. Because here's the thing. He's praying for you. He sees you, he hears you, he understands. Did he know the storm was coming? Did he know they were going to be struggling? Did he know what they were facing? Did he abandon them? He did not abandon them. So look, the first thing here is that Jesus sent them into the storm. And I want us to understand that sometimes the troubles and the struggles that we face is that Jesus is allowing that, and he's allowing that for purpose. Now I want to go through some of those purposes, all right? Now, so we can look at storms of life. We can view them as obstacles. You ever done that? If I can just get through this, man. You can see them as obstacles, or you can see them as opportunities. You hear me? You can see them as obstacles, or you can see them as opportunities. And here, Jesus is using this storm to teach them something and to show them something. And so the first thing here, do you think the disciples were uncomfortable in this situation? I believe they were. And so, again, they're filled with fears and uncertainties. And let me just say that this going through this little season right here, he's preparing them for future ministry. That's what he's doing, to trust him. He's preparing them. He's preparing them for that. So they have been for hours now struggling in this boat. Now, I don't know whose boat this was. It might have been Peter's boat. I don't know. Might have been John's boat. I don't know. They got in a boat, and they headed out to the middle of the sea. And here they are. These are experienced sailors, experienced fishermen. They've been on this Sea of Galilee hundreds and hundreds of times before. They knew all about this, and I mean, they had this thing down, didn't they? They did it every day. And so look, what can begin to happen when that happens, when that takes place, is that they can begin to trust their own strength. They can begin to trust their sails and their ropes, their own ability, their own knowledge, the strength of their arms. They can begin to trust that instead of what? Instead of trusting the Lord. And so look, here's the thing. And they begin to look at their strength and their abilities and their knowledge and their wherewithal. And guess what? They became fearful because they couldn't control this storm. They couldn't overcome it. They couldn't get around it. They were in the middle of it. And man, they'd been struggling for hours and hours and hours. And now Jesus has waited to let them get to the end of their strength. All right? To let them understand that, look, there's some things that they can't do, but there's nothing that he can't. All right, and so he let them get to that point. And sometimes God will allow things into our life to let us get down to our weakest moment and our weakest time so that we can understand that we can't do it, but he can do it. And so we begin to lose faith in ourselves and increase our faith in him. It has to happen that way. And this is what begins to happen. What is happening here? At the end of this, who are they looking at? Verse 33, they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth, thou art the Son of God. What are they doing at the end of all this? I mean, here they're still in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. The storm has been calm at this time, but who are they recognizing? So a lot of times God brings things into our life to reveal to us what's on the inside so that he can bring it to the forefront. This one is fear for them, fear. Let me give you another example of this. You remember Peter, and this was something we learned on this trip, and I'm gonna share it with you. You remember Peter? He was a bold guy, wasn't he? I mean, he always putting his foot in his mouth, and always, had something to say. And then Jesus comes to him and he says, "Look, you're going to betray me." Everybody else might, not me, not this one. No way. And what does he do? He has a sword, doesn't he? And they're in the garden. What does he do? Oh, they're coming to get Jesus. Let me pull out my sword. Remember the story. I'm going to fight to the end. What is he trusting in? What does he trust? Look, this is a lesson that Peter had to learn. I'm just telling you. He's trying to teach it to him. Jesus is trying to teach it to him. He's trying to teach it to him in the boat. He tries to teach it to him throughout his life. He finally gets it, though, and I want to share you. But all right, so he pulls out his sword, and what does he do? He went for the soldier's head and cut off his ear, right? And his name was Malchus. And Jesus looks at him and says, "Put up your sword. Those that live by the sword will die by the sword. Put up your sword." But I can defend you. I can do it. My strength, my arms, my sword, I can do it. He was trusting the flesh, wasn't he? But a little bit later in time, you remember what happened. Let's go to Acts chapter 2. You don't have to turn there. Just go in your mind with me. In Acts chapter number 2, here they are. There's the Pharisees. There's everybody around. There's thousands of people around. But he doesn't pull his sword this time. He pulls a different type of sword, doesn't he? He pulls the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God. And he begins to preach. Thousands of people get saved. This church gets started. Who was he trusting in that day? So we go back to the boat now. Who was he trusting in to start with? What was the Lord trying to teach him? Let me ask you something. The storms that God has brought into your life, what is he trying to teach you? For many of us, it would be the same lesson. Quit trying to trust ourselves in our own strength and rest in Him. Do you remember when Jesus, in a previous story to this, remember when Jesus, there was another storm. Their disciples were in the storm, and Jesus was on the boat with them. The storm was there. What was Jesus doing? He was asleep. What? How do you do that? Let me tell you something. If your faith and your trust is in the Lord and your confidence is in Him, I'm going to tell you there's a peace and a rest that you can have in the middle of the storm. In the middle of the storm. And so, so he did this. Jesus created this opportunity, not this obstacle. He created this opportunity to prove them. And so He will do the same for us, to prove us. Sometimes He allows us to go through things. You ever had somebody make you mad? All right, so, and it may be something you cause, it may not be something you cause, but sometimes you can get so angry. Some people have trouble with anger, you know. And sometimes God brings a person in life to come across your path to bring that anger to the surface to help you to recognize it. You with me? I mean, man, you ever balled up your fist and want to just pop somebody right in the mouth? You ever done that? I've done it. I mean, I haven't done, you know. I've wanted to do it. Let me say it that way. I've wanted to do it, but I didn't do it. But God uses people like that to bring things to the surface, and God is using this storm to bring things to the surface of their unbelief and their lack of faith, and that's what He does. Now, what is He using the storms in your life to bring to the surface for you to recognize? So, He did this to prove them. He created an opportunity to prove them, but then also an opportunity to prove who He was. Now, and my time is almost gone. I want us to go to, of course, Jesus comes to them walking on the water, but I want us to go to Job chapter 9 for a moment. Job chapter 9, and you remember the story of Job, and Job and God end up having conversations back and forth, and this is one of those conversations, and we're getting some characteristics of who God is. And by the way, the Jewish people, they train their children from birth. They read to them all the time about God's Word. They take their boys to the prayer things. They have a little prayer right beside the Wailing Wall. There's a little hole in the wall right there, a little opening in the wall. You can go back in there, and there's a library in there. And in that library, only the men can go in there. The ladies have another side. And in that library, there's a list. There's books just stacked along the wall. And they're prayer books, prayers that have been made that they read. And they go and they take their boys in there to teach them how to pray. Would to God that some of our men would do that with their boys, teach them how to pray and teach them how to read and to study God's Word. But they're taught that from a very early age. But so Job, this should have been a little bit familiar to them. Job chapter 9, verse number, I'm going to back up just a little bit. Verse number 6, it says, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble. Now, who can do that? Which commandeth the sun, and it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars, which alone spreadeth out the heavens. Who does that? Look what it says, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea. Now, hold on a second. Job, this is the earliest book that has ever to be written. This is the oldest book of the Bible, Job is. And in there, it says there, in chapter 9, verse number 8, it says that God treadeth upon the waves of the sea. So here is Jesus. He's coming to them. What is He doing? He's treading upon the waves of the sea. What is He trying to show them? What is He trying to reveal to them? He's trying to reveal to them that, look, He's God. Their strength won't be able to do it. But what can He do? He can do it. As a matter of fact, He comes to them treading upon the water, and then even after that, it says this. Look at verse 28, Peter. And Peter said unto him and said, Lord, if it be thou. Hold on. They're in the middle of this storm. It's raging. I mean, the wind, the sea, the waves, the water, the boat being tossed to and fro. And here comes somebody walking to them on the water. In Job 9, who would that be? It's a spirit. It's a ghost. Oh man, the situation just went from bad to worse. Now we're out here in the middle of the water, and now we got creatures coming in here. If it's you. Oh, can you just imagine just being there? Can you imagine that? And there's doubt in their mind. And look, I'm just saying to you that sometimes when we get in the middle of our storms, we can't see clearly. You with me? Sometimes we get our mind so much on the situation and the circumstance that we can't see clearly. Who sent them into the storm? And I'm saying to you that, look, he allows storms into our life. Yes, he wants to teach us to trust him, to believe him. But he's trying to show us something about himself, of who he is and his strength and his ability. And he's wanting us to lay aside our own strength and our own desires and our own abilities and our own unbelief and our own fears, to lay all those aside, to wholeheartedly trust him and see him in those situations so that he can prove himself. Now, eventually they get it. Look what it says, verse 33, eventually, and they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, it is the truth, thou art who? The Son of God. They finally get it, right? There's been so many times in my life, and all of us can do this, we can look back upon the trials of life, and I hope you can do this. God wants us to do this. He wants to increase you know what faith is seeing beyond. That's what that is. To see beyond the circumstances, to see beyond the troubles, to see beyond the trials, and to see God's hand at work. That's what he wants us to do. And so, have you ever done that? You ever got on the other side of the storm? Sometimes it's hard to do it when you're in the storm, man. Oh, you're waiting. Is that God over there? Is that Jesus? What is that really you? But then when you finally realize that God brought you through that storm, or he's in that storm with you, and he's trying to reveal himself to you, then look, what does that do for you when you actually see it? Man, I mean, your faith is increased. Your trust is increased, and I'm going to tell you, begin to discover things about God that you'd never know before. They're not here today, but Miss Ann and Ronnie, they've gone through quite a struggle, quite a trial over the last several years. And Miss Ann, one day, I was talking to Miss Ann up here, and it was like, I don't remember, in between choir practice or something, and we were sitting up here talking. And I pray for them so very often, because I know that's a tough situation. And this is what Miss Ann said to me. That's a storm that they have gone through and are in. And Miss Ann said something to me. She said, I used to think I knew God. Now, this is not talking about her salvation or anything like that. He said, but now I've seen him in a different way, and I know him better and deeper. That's what he was doing with his disciples. I want you to see me. I want you to see who I am. I want you to see what I can do in your life. That's what Miss Ann's testimony was. And I'm saying to you, there's been trials and troubles that I have gone through. And I'm going to tell you, if you can see the hand of God in it, it will do something for you that nothing else would do. Do I like troubles and trials and struggles? No. But I'm going to tell you, the ones I have been through and the Lord has brought me through, I wouldn't trade them for anything. Because I have seen the Lord in ways that I would never see him any other way. And it would increase my faith and want me to trust him for more. And you can see his faithfulness. Can you see his faithfulness in these verses? Did he abandon them? No. So I don't know if you have a struggle that you're going through today. I have no idea. This is what I know. Whatever struggle or whatever trial, if you're coming out of one, going into one, you're in the middle of one, whatever, he wants to prove you. He wants to bring to the surface the uncertainties, the fears, the doubts. He wants so you can deal with those things. And he also wants to prove himself to you, who he is, and his strength and his power. He came to them. They didn't recognize him. He got in the boat. What happened? You want relief from your storm? You want relief from your storm? When did they get relief? When he got in the boat and they began to worship him and they recognized, hey, this is the Son of God. See beyond your trial, see beyond your struggle, and see God's hand, and see his face in it. And then God and God alone will do what he and he alone can do. Amen? Let's stand together. We'll sing a hymn of invitation. If the Lord has spoken to you today, I would ask you to come and tell it to him. Let's sing together.
In Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm from the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are still, when striving cease. My comforter, my all in all.